So we're looking at a mist bench in late November, and we're looking at batches and batches of cuttings which were inserted in trays during the course of the summer. And generally speaking, the mist bench is looking absolutely fantastic. A lot of these plants, particularly the scented rhododendrons, have probably started to root already. And if we are to tweak one or two very gently, I can't pull that one up, so it's good news that they've rooted. But one of the things that you really need to concentrate on at this time of the year is any of your cuttings which haven't rooted, or where you've got leaves that have gone black. You can see that this little batch of azalea cuttings have rooted. They're starting to shoot, but the older leaves have died off, and they need carefully picking out, because that's where botrytis and rot will come in to this little batch of cuttings over the winter, because we're keeping them very damp and they've got bottom heat, so there's warmth coming up through. And anything that's deciduous, that hasn't got any leaves on, like this little batch of cuttings there, you can see there are green shoots coming. We know they've rooted, we know that's all fine, but just pick off any dead leaves or anything that looks a bit past it around and about. Now I'm just doing this quickly, it'll take a minute or two to clean everything off, but you see what we're being left with is nice cuttings which already rooted and put on some new growth, so we want to nurse them through the winter. Occasionally we find a batch which, no, that's a deciduous batch of cuttings there. So again, the leaves have just dropped now and gone brown. We need to pick them off and get them out of the way to avoid any problems there. But if we find a batch of cuttings that have failed, now is the moment to chuck them out so we don't get any disease infection from anything else. But the more we look, the more good news we see, right down through the mist bench, with all sorts of wonderful things coming on for the spring. But you do need 2 or 3 times a week to pick over the mist bench, look for anything dead or dying or not looking right, and pull it out and get rid of it in the interests of having a successful crop to pot on next spring. And just as an afterthought, as I move further down the greenhouse, I find a couple of trays of cuttings which have been moved away from the bottom heat, and the reason being because they're very clearly fully rooted, so they don't need to be sitting with a mist spray over them every day, and with heat from bottom heat. You can see that they've rooted well and the new growth is coming, and it's time for them to be just hardened off a little bit and left with their roots until potting next spring. But they don't need to take the risk of rotting off or any botrytis infections. So what's been done here is taken them out of the mist bench rather, and put them somewhere along with the other small plants just to sit for the winter, being dried off now, obviously not still kept damp, but being dried off from the mist bench, and we don't expect to see much leaf drop there. We don't expect much botrytis problem. Really good news from cuttings that were only taken probably in the June time this year. Already they're rooted, and next spring they'll grow away like mad.